The Bengals have a lot of work to do in free agency, and we are setting expectations high on this podcast for the Bengals to be active in free agency.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network in the land. He's James Rapien, I'm Jake Liscow, and we are your hosts of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We've been doing this thing going all the way back to 2016 between the two of us, bringing you daily coverage of your Cincinnati Bengals, and that is about to ramp up in a big way with free agency right around the corner. This will serve as one of your two free agency preview kind of episodes. We'll have another one for you before free agency opens, and that will be the legal negotiating window, affectionately known as the legal tampering window, on Monday next week, or maybe today, depending on when you're listening to this episode. And today we're going to dive into our lofty expectations for the Cincinnati Bengals in terms of activity level in this year's free agency period. And that's the sense that we are going to have from this team going into free agency. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. You want to get tickets to an event? You want to get tickets to a future Bengals game? Check out the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON. You'll save $20 on your first purchase of tickets. And James, we released to the public the full free agency sheet, so make sure you're looking out on social media for the link to that, where you and me and Joe Goodberry and Mike Santagata have gone through, I feel like, hundreds of free agents and put some tierings out there. We've got projected contract information in there, a whole lot of great data in there for you to check out. And it might be something that we refer to in the future here on this podcast, might see it on this podcast in the future. So keep an eye out for that on social media. But today, wanted to dive into what we think the Bengals are going to do and set expectations in terms of what a successful free agency would look like for the Cincinnati Bengals, defining success, getting on the record before this thing opens, so we have something that we can refer back to and say, yeah, they checked those boxes, or no, they came up short. And last year was a year where we felt like they came up short. We were waiting for the additional moves that never arrived. And I think that there were some coaches on the Bengals staff that felt the same way, James, but we've talked a lot about three levels of the defense. I think that's where it starts. I don't think that's where it ends, but I think that's where it starts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you envision this free agent period for the Bengals, there's weaknesses all over, right? And you need to plug those holes. And that's where the standard is. Like, if you're entering the draft and there's this glaring hole on defense, well, I'm probably going to be frustrated with what they did in free agency. And I'm going to outline that a little bit more, because that doesn't mean that Ruben Bain wouldn't be able to help them at 10 or Caleb Downs wouldn't be able to help them at 10. But they need to put themselves in a position where if they don't get that guy, if they don't get the day two guy that lines up on their board that they would love, and who knows, maybe it's Jacob Rodriguez, right? Like, maybe that's their guy at linebacker at 41, and instead he goes 40, right? And I'm going high on draft projection, but you just never know. Well, if that happens, you should be like, okay, well, we have so-and-so at linebacker plus Demetrius Knight plus Barrett Carter. Oh, man, I can't believe Ruben Bain is a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Good thing we added this edge after Trey Hendrickson left. And this edge, maybe it's Joseph Osai, but feels like Osai is going to get paid elsewhere. I don't know. Maybe my vibes are off on that. But you get my point here. Add a starting safety. And then if you find another one in the draft early, Caleb Downs, well, guess what? He's versatile. You'll find a way to get those three guys on the field. Al Golden can have his guy Jordan Battle riffing all he wants, and he can still play. And so, like, defining what makes the Bengals successful in free agency, I think the Dalton Reisner re-signing was huge, because now, and I speak for trench men everywhere, it's all on plugging these holes. It doesn't mean that you're going to have the fastest boat on the lake, but make sure that that defensive boat isn't shipping or isn't sinking. and is floating nicely because it's been sinking like the Titanic for 3 years. And Geno Stone and Logan Wilson and all these guys that you've been banking on have not helped. You need to find some guys that are going to help prop it up and get you back above water.
Yeah, and it's multiple guys, right? It's the 3 levels of the defense. And like I said, that's where it starts. That's not where it ends. It's not necessarily even just one guy on all 3 levels, but that's kind of the baseline, right? Is one guy is the minimum at all 3 levels. And I would go so far as to say probably 2 guys on the defensive line.
Minimum.
Probably the minimum there. I think if they only add a defensive tackle or only add an end, they're probably in a pretty bad place heading into the draft. Really hoping that they can get an impact player at one of those positions at pick number 10, if that's the way free agency goes. And now you're like, man, sure hope we can get Ruben Bain, to go back to your example, or like, boy, do we like Peter Woods or Caleb Banks or any of the potential first round. I think those are the only 2 potential first round defensive tackles, because it's not seen as a great defensive tackle class. But you don't want to be desperate at any spot. And that's why I say adding to the defense is only where it starts, because I was corrected when I called it a sneaky need at tight end and was told that it is not sneaky to anyone paying attention.
Ooh.
We haven't talked about it a ton. Is part of why I call it sneaky. The other reason I call it sneaky is because I don't know how dire the Bengals see the position, where Drew Sample's still under contract. They brought back Tanner Hudson. They still have Mike Gesicki on the roster. They know more than we do about Eric All. So speculating there, have no idea what direction that would go. But
yeah,
it doesn't end with the defense for me. Like, I would like to see them try to shore up some things in terms of depth on the offensive side of the ball too. There are a whole lot of tight ends out there this year. I don't know how much you've looked at that, James. I feel like there's a ton of tight ends out there. If they wanted to add a guy that could push that room as the versatile tight end piece, so you know, in case you can't get a guy in the draft, in case Eric Hall can't come back, you have a piece there. I'd be kicking the tires on wide receiver depth as well, and potentially wide receiver competition at the back of that depth chart. So there's some other things, but for sure it starts on defense, and it's starting level players on defense. You're looking for starting safety, starting linebacker, starting defensive end, and or rotational defensive end, high-end rotational defensive end, high-end rotational defensive tackle / starting defensive tackle. Not necessarily the Trey Hendricksons of the world, but if they wanted to go out there and take a swing on a player like that this year, the ascending player, to me, that's Jalen Phillips. I've talked about that. If they can get there with the medicals there. But if you wanted to take a swing on the upside guy, finding one upside guy at these positions, which probably takes you to edge, maybe linebacker, I think that's part of it too. It's not just starting level players. I would like to see them try to find a piece that will be a strong starting player on this defense, a difference maker on this defense, a force multiplier on this defense as well.
And so there's not many. That's what's tough. There's not many. And, you know, if you look at edge, there's a few guys, right? Jalen Phillips is in the same tier as you mentioned the free agent sheet. Among the group, he's above Odafe Owe. I have him in the same tier at 1.5. And I think that both have their flaws, and yet both are really intriguing and mighty interesting to roll the dice on. And it is very Trey Hendrickson 2021-esque, where if they sign one of those guys, it will be exciting. There will also be buts, and there will be questions about it. And so do they go that route? There's going to be questions with a lot of guys that they have to add. Do they make that big splurge, that difference maker type of contract offer at linebacker versus edge? I think that's really interesting. Do they pivot and go with a guy like John Franklin Myers, who just seems destined to go to Tennessee, with everyone in Nashville calling for him? Obviously, Robert Saleh was his coach in New York. I don't know, but there aren't many when you think like, all right, well, this is going to be this game-changing player. There aren't many. I do think the Bengals need to get one. Will they? Well, that would go a long way toward making it a successful free agency. We'll continue the conversation and have more talk about this Bengals defense that needs more playmakers coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you need because, look, we live in a world where we can stream anything, order food in minutes, carry supercomputers in our pockets, and somehow buying tickets to a live game is still complicated. It's still challenging. You have hidden fees, jumping prices, endless steps. Well, there's a better way, ladies and gentlemen, and it's with Game Time. The Game Time app is going to take all of the stress out of buying tickets, all in pricing, panoramic views directly from your seat. You know exactly what view you're going to get from your phone. In the app, it's going to show you. So when you get to the event, there are no surprises, and you can even spot zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seat for extra savings. 2 taps, and you have great seats locked in. It's that easy. Fast, easy, done with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, locked on for $20 off. Download Game Time today.
Just a reminder, folks, that with free agency right around the corner, it's a great time to get in on one of 2 or maybe both groups that I'm about to tell you about that might be interesting to you. First is the Everydayer Club, which you can join free if you join before March 15th with promo code free agency. You can check out the Everydayer Club at lockedonbengals.supercast.com, where you can get an ad-free episode. You can hop into the Discord with the other Everydayers and talk about what's going on with the Bengals in free agency. James and I are in that Discord a little bit every day as well. And the other thing is, this is the best time of year for it, I think, is the Locked On Bengals Insider Group. That's at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBengals, where James and I will share with you any information that we can around this free agency period. The examples we've alluded to this week were the news that James and I both kind of knew was coming, but didn't know exactly when, which was Dalton Risner, and that negotiation trending in the right direction coming out of the combine. Our insiders found out about that over the weekend, right before Dalton Risner ended up signing his extension or his re-signed 1-year deal with the Bengals. And when we have information like that, we do love to share it. You can check that out, like I said, at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBengals. A whole bunch of people popping on board for that during free agency at this time of year, James.
Jake, how many, because we both did the same sheet, how many of those force multipliers do you think are there? Like guys that realistically can take that next step? Because no one's more accomplished than Trey. And from a availability standpoint, obviously he's not coming back. I get it. You would take the swing on Jalen Phillips, but how many of those guys are there, period, across all positions, defensively at least, here in free agency?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot, right? You look at the guys that have a consensus rank better than a tier 2 kind of free agent this year, and it is a short list. And that's Devin Lloyd, who we're consensus pretty high on Devin Lloyd coming off a good year, 28 years old, though, coming off a great year, though, with the Jaguars. There's Jalen Phillips, who I mentioned, who I personally put as a 2, but that was simply to hedge against the injury risk. I see that,
Sure.
You and Joe have him at a 1.5, and
I had him at a 2, and I bumped it to a 1.5 because I look at him and OA very similar. They have different flaws or different concerns.
Yeah.
But like the upside is there. So I was like, why would he be in a tier lower than OA? So that's why it was kind of that.
And for me, I have OA even lower. I do think that Jalen Phillips, if he's healthy, is clearly a better player than Odafe OA. But just a health concern there, right? But if Phillips can be healthy for a few years for you, that's the guy that will be on the Trey Hendrickson-like trajectory when the Bengals sign Trey Hendrickson. He's I think a little bit older than when the Bengals signed Trey, but the pass rush win rate, the ability to be a 3-down player, that's Jalen Phillips this year. Jonathan Franklin Myers, I think, gets into the conversation as well. I think Brian Cook gets into the conversation as well as the best available safety out there. Yep. But I think once you get beyond that, you're looking for guys that fit and guys that if you get enough of them, you can piece together a defense that has enough pieces. But in terms of like single guys that could have that kind of impact, I think that's it. I think you're talking about based on what we think going into this free agency. And I want to refer to something when the Bengals signed Trey Hendrickson in a minute here. Devin Lloyd, Jalen Phillips, John Franklin Myers, and then I think you can make an argument for Brian Cook. And I know you would maybe make an argument for Odafe Owe. You see him in a brighter light than I do. And I think that's it when you talk about guys that are really going to come in and kind of chalk, the chalk outcome would be that guy could really elevate you at that position.
For sure. And I think the reason I think Oweh's in that mix for sure. I think Leo Chenal you can make the argument for.
Yeah.
And part of that is fit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is oh well, he's going to get here and it's going to be a great fit and it's going to help unleash and unlock a little bit more for Demetrius Knight. And so that's part of it. And
yeah, the fit and like part of the multiplayer approach is how I see Chenal, and not like necessarily the on his own kind of guy. So like you have to draw a line somewhere, but I do think that's a worthy mention by you.
Yeah. And so like, but think about that. Think about how many guys we just mentioned. Like you're not even in on Oweh at that level. And so it's, if you don't view it that way, then it's like Devin Lloyd. Like I would rather sign Odafe Oweh than Devin Lloyd. And yet there are going to be a lot of people that are weighing on Devin Lloyd, and we look at it and all of us had him as a 1.5. And even though he might be a little bit better of a player, it's a tough balance. I think it's tough to invest that at linebacker in a great linebacker draft too.
It is. And a good linebacker free agency group where there are a lot of options that could get you for either a 1-year deal for a guy like Demario Davis or one of the veterans out there, or Leo Chenal is going to be likely a factor cheaper than Devin Lloyd, like considerably cheaper than Devin Lloyd, and might be just what you need, you know?
Let's talk about a guy because we're talking about linebacker. By the way, this is something Bengals, your free agent additions need to match the draft. And what I mean by that is last year, the draft sucked at linebacker. We all knew it. You should have signed a linebacker. Like clearly Al Golden wanted a linebacker. It should match. So like if you really want something and the draft doesn't have it or it's lean at it, get it now, get it next week, get it the week after, whatever it is. That being said, we were talking about linebacker, and Quay Walker is someone that's going to be exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not in.
Other people are going to be mad on, and I know we feel the same way about this. We are in lockstep here. I think he would feel like a splash signing, and it would be not like Trey. Like I didn't question the Trey nearly as much as I would a Quay Walker, $14 million per year, and that might be low. Who knows what he gets? But coming to Cincinnati for 3 for 42, for example.
Yeah, that might be a guy that the NFL is much higher on than we are.
We have him in tier 3. So,
and what did I put on Quay Walker? Out of curiosity,
3. Mm-hmm.
I am surprised at myself. might go adjust that one after we talked about that. I did just go see one that maybe 3 is okay, because
I think 3's fine. 3's a starter, in a lot of ways,
like an okay starter. I think I was grading on a harsher curve this year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not there on that one. I would be more interested in the 1-year deal on the Demario Davis or like Levante David or even Bobby Wagner, like the veteran kind of guy who could be a bridge player. Mm-hmm. That honestly makes a lot of sense to me this year. If you're not going to get a guy that you think is going to be a multi-year good starter for you, maybe that's Devin Bush, right? And Devin Bush is coming off a career revival year behind a great defensive line, so you got to think about that in Cleveland. Or maybe it's Devin Lloyd, right? One of the 2 Devins at linebacker. Unless it's one of those guys, you're making a big investment there with the veteran. One of these 1-year end of career, still knows where they need to be, maybe lost a step, but are still good players. And one of these veterans at linebacker, given the texture of the draft class, man, like you talked about, makes a lot of sense to me.
I have a question, and it's going to be a juicy one.
All right.
And would it fill the void at defensive line? Would you be happy with this haul? It's a trio. That's the tease. We will get to that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major update, an upgrade with Intuit TurboTax. Now, Intuit TurboTax has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. Just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right, Jake. Would you be happy? Would you be sad if a week from now the Bengals announce a 1-year deal with Khalil Mack, a 1-year deal with Jadeveon Clowney, and a 1-year deal with DJ Reader? How would you feel if that trio was just inserted into the Bengals defensive line room? They lose Osai. They bring in 2 guys in Mack and Clowney, still productive. Obviously, they would rotate with Shamar and Miles, and then they bring back an old friend in DJ Reader, and you have Slayton, Reader, Hill, Chris Jenkins, and that's kind of your core here going into the draft in that defensive line room.
Well, they're definitely
it's old.
They're definitely restructuring Joe Burrow's contract in that situation to make cap space, because that's not all I'm doing. I'm not only signing 1-year deals, and if you're signing 1-year deals for veterans who are good players, those are going to eat up your cap space in a hurry. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Maybe it's a 2 for Reader or 2 for Mack or whatever, but like you're investing in those 3 guys. I agree. I don't want a bunch of 1-year deals.
I'm getting there. So if it's that's why it's hard to do too many of these kinds of deals, like Demario Davis and Jadeveon Clowney and another one. Like that would be a lot of 1-year deals for high level aging veterans who are, probably nearing the end of their careers, but still have some good football left in them. But the players,
they're good.
They're still good players. Like DJ Reader's still a solid player. Khalil Mack still good. Jadeveon Clowney coming off one of his more productive years in recent history. So all those guys still good players. How much would it cost? What's the cap situation? Like that's certainly another conversation. But the players, not that I think the Bengals would ever do this, but the players, despite their age, still good players. And there's a reason we've talked about Calais Campbell for the last 4 years. He's still 40 now.
Come on.
Still a solid player. Still would be good for this team. And, there's a caveat with him that maybe he just doesn't want to play in the north, like literally north of, I don't know, Tennessee.
Sure.
Somewhere that has seasons.
Buy him a sauna. Buy him a sauna. Get your butt here, Calais.
Yeah. There's a reason that we're talking about those guys. We'll see if this is the year the Bengals do it, right? But I do we talked about this before we started recording. So funny, this is going to be the second time I mentioned it. It kind of reminds me of the Terrell Owens year a little bit. And there isn't a whole lot of history for the Bengals in going after these kinds of players. And T.O. is his own beast. But there's something that feels desperate to me about getting a bunch of guys like this. Like going for three 1-year player, and like maybe it works out, maybe that's a gambit that works, but it does feel a little desperate to be like, man, yeah, these guys, we just need 1 year. We just want to do it for 1 year. Feels very anti-Bengals, but that's my.
Here's why you could sell me on the idea. Here's why you could sell me on the idea, and you could sell me on a lot of things if it means getting a competent defense on the field. So, preface it with that, right? None of those guys would block like everything you just did. You raised the floor, but you could still get Reuben Bain. You could still get Peter Woods. You could still get Caleb Banks. You could still get an edge in round 2, TJ Parker. We mocked him earlier this week. Like those things all still on the table. They could all still play. They could all still be part of a rotation. But you have like the standard is just a bit higher with those guys. Like the floor is higher. They've been there, done that type. So that's why I mentioned that. I know it's not ideal. Like I would much rather have multi-year deal, the ascending player, all of those things. But it's just a path that if you added Ruben Bain and you had Shamar and you have Miles on a 5th-year option, which is probably going to happen, like it does fit. Like Jadeveon Clowney does fit for this year as those guys are developing. Now, do you need to go get Khalil Mack too? That's where the Bengals would be like, come on, we're not doing that. And I
That's
get
why
it.
that's why I
Yeah.
think you mentioned it, is because, like, yeah, it's probably not all three, but maybe it's one, or maybe it's two. And maybe
Two.
that's like, maybe it's a linebacker, maybe it's one of those three linebackers I mentioned earlier: Bobby Wagner, Demario Davis, Levante David, all players I think would help
Yeah.
at linebacker, right? Maybe it's one of those linebackers, and maybe it's one of these guys on the defensive line. Maybe it's one of Khalil Mack or Jadeveon Clowney or even Cam Jordan. I don't think Joey Bosa, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong there. And maybe in addition to that, they're kicking around Boye Mafe or an Arnold Ebiketie or a Quiddy Pay or one of these guys that
Hargrave
maybe they see as upgrade. Yeah, maybe on the
on the
defensive
interior.
It's
I'm in on
Hargrave.
Hargrave, by the way. I'll just throw that out there. I'm in.
Yeah, the only guy that's really exciting as a free agent to us as a collective on the interior, outside of John Franklin Myers, who you almost count as not being realistic, is Logan Hall.
Yeah, Hall. That's it.
I
mean,
thought
really
that's where you were
nothing.
going when you said a Hall. I thought you were gonna come in and squeeze Logan Hall into and do a pun.
Oh no. I just Hargrave is interesting as like that older guy, like that 1 year type guy. But no, Logan Hall from a multi-year man, because maybe he's just a serviceable rotation guy. Like maybe that's it. But maybe there's something else there. If I'm them, here, let's play. Would you rather? Would you rather Jalen Phillips and Logan Hall, or John Franklin Myers and who's the upside edge that fits that a little bit? And Boye Mafe.
Probably the second one, Mafe and JFM.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Let's go down to Ebiketie.
Probably still the second one.
Okay. Let's see how far we can go here. Chase on. This is where it's going to change.
Yeah, then I'm out because Chase on isn't in that group for me. Chase on is
we've talked. Okay. Because I think
and Egbari would be similar. Like once you get out of the Mafe, Ebiketie, like those guys are a tier above the fall off for me.
Yeah. And I think it's just a fun would you rathers in different scenarios. Caleb Von Chase. I was interested in him last year, but the Bengals were not interested in free agency last year. They took last year off. They should be well rested.
Yeah, ready to go.
God.
So we're in agreement that we're talking multiple starters.
Yeah.
Couple defensive linemen would be great. I get it. It's tough on the defensive interior this year. It might be really hard to find a guy there, especially if they aren't interested in the 1 year type of deals for a guy like a DJ Reader or even a David Onyemata, a Calais Campbell. Go all the way down the list to even Shelby Harris or like you mentioned, Javon Hargrave, and those guys potentially having specific roles. People have asked about Christian Wilkins. No idea what's going on with his health. Certainly an edge rusher. This is where I think you could see them try to target one of these 27-year-olds.
Yeah.
There's several of them. There's Jalen Phillips, Adafe Owe, Boye Mafe, and Arnold Ebiketie. All those guys. You could throw Caleb Von Chase on into the mix as well. You could throw Quiddy Pay and Kingsley Enagbare into the mix as well. And you could even throw Joseph Osai returning into that group, although you talked about the expectation that he might find other pastures earlier in the show. Certainly a safety, right? We've talked at length in the past about how many safeties are out there. We'll talk more about who some of those targets might be before free agency opens on Sunday, and a linebacker and what direction they go at linebacker is going to be interesting. Do they go that veteran stopgap transition player kind of route there, knowing what might be available to them in the draft and hoping for more development from their 2 draft picks from 2025.
I need a real safety too. Not this fake safety. He intercepted Joe Burrow once upon a time.
How much do we think they're going to spend this year for safety? Are they going to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should have done the Jesse Bates thing and we're going to spend Jesse Bates money on a safety?
That's what I would. I mean, I would spend more on a safety than a linebacker. I don't know if that's a take, but that, like, going in, I would be planning that. Now, if it doesn't work because Brian Cook gets $20 million per year, well, then fine. Then we'll pivot and that's it. And you drop down and you retool and you do that. But yeah, I mean, I would be ready to, because you've tried to piece it together. Nick Scott, 3 years, $12 million, didn't work after a year. Geno Stone, man, he got a reasonable deal, like 2 years, he had $14 million or whatever it was. Well, that's why it was reasonable, because no one wanted him, and it didn't work. And as I'm talking, if you're watching on YouTube, you saw it. But as I'm talking, Geno Stone just missed another tackle. He tried to tackle Jake in Canada. Jake is in the end zone if you're listening.
Come on. Strays on the way out.
No.
So what do you think,
Missed
James?
another tackle.
Next episode from the people, for the people, from us, we'll get into what will we do, and then free agency opens the next day, and then we're peppering you with hopefully a lot of activity as the Bengals are making us do so, keeping us active next week. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode. Hoo day, and have a good one.
Should Geno Stone be in tier 5?